Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlicker, shills, debt slaves, search, peasants, vassals, minions, meat sacks, veterans. I'm usually welcome. And so here's another headline that we have out there. DOGE and the Trump administration are going after the Veterans Administration. And it just sounds so outrageous on the surface. Oh, we're going to go after this wonderful government service that helps all our veterans. And on the surface, that's what it is. And that's a great thing. And we have 9 million servicemen that use the services of the Veterans Administration. But as always, if we look a little closer, we come up with some problems. And what's being done at the VA right now really is pretty minimal and not that invasive. And it doesn't seem like it's necessarily going to affect the services offered by the VA. So first thing, of course, is they're going to audit all the contracts. And there's a lot of things like PowerPoint slides and meeting notes and watering plants and consulting and all those kind of things that should be done in-house. And yet we have contracts with outside contractors providing these services to the VA. And like everyone else that contracts with the government, a lot of them are abusing it, and there's a lot of fraud, a lot of waste, and a lot of exorbitant fees. So that's something that should be looked at. But looking at the details of addressing issues at the VA, I think it's legitimate to go after the VA being involved in DEI training, prosthetic private parts, hair removal programs, voice training programs, hormone therapy for people that are transitioning. And I think that's outside the scope of the VA. It's there to provide legitimate health needs of veterans and wounds and other things associated with combat and their service in the military. And I think if there's military people that want the government to help them transition, that's outside the scope of the VA. And I don't think taxpayer money should go to that. And as the head of the VA pointed out, these are just outside the scope of what the VA should be doing. We should be using that money to address the serious health issues of combat veterans. And so a lot of these services and these non-mission contracts can be eliminated, and they're talking about right off the bat $900 million in savings. And I'd rather have $900 million in savings for doing boutique services at the VA and have it given to veterans that have serious medical issues due to their service and combat duty. And so 2,400 people have been cut, which is a very small amount. And eventually they're talking about eliminating 80,000 people. Once again, on the surface, that sounds pretty outrageous. And we think the service to our veterans is going to suffer for it. But the fact is that Biden added during his last 4 years 52,000 new workers. So if we cut it back 80,000, it's almost comparable to the amount of people that Biden added to the VA. And as we know, Biden spent the last 4 years hiring a ton of government workers to make his unemployment figures look rosier. And part of that was an astonishing record amount of government hires. And so they're fattening up even at the VA. And so if we go back to 2019 levels, how is the VA going to be suffering? Because the other point being that under the 4 years of Biden, there was no huge combat missions, and under the 4 years of Trump before that, there was no huge combat missions, and therefore the amount of veterans that need service from the VA has essentially remained flat. So why do we need to bolster the staff of the VA by another 50,000? And I understand that to give better service, we need more people. I have a friend that works at the VA, and she definitely talks about the fact that she's overloaded a lot, and they do one-on-one phone calls with a lot of veterans. And so having more people there potentially can add more service. So that's something that needs to be looked at for sure. But there's also a lot of improper payments, and that's one of the things that DOGE is looking at a lot besides contracts and DEI programs, and that's in the case of the VA, $500 million of unauthorized dental and prescriptions. And again, I would have to see more details to see exactly what we're talking about. It seems like it's well within the VA's mission to address dental and prescription issues for veterans. But once again, the VA shouldn't be a catch-all for all the health services that servicemen need, because we already have government programs and government health and medical programs that should address prescription and dental issues, which shouldn't necessarily be something that's run through the VA. Once again, VA should be specialized to address veterans who have post-combat issues. That should be its main mission, and it's a pretty huge mission, particularly if you look at 9 million servicemen using that service. My dad used the VA. Some days he was very happy with the service he got from them, and other days he wasn't happy with it. A lot of that, of course, has to do with interface with people trying to get a hold of the VA and get services rendered. But my dad was pretty happy with all the services he was provided. He was in Vietnam back in 1968 and 1970, and he had ongoing health issues from exposure to Agent Orange, and so that's a legitimate service that he needs from the VA to address those issues. So all this boutique stuff is something that we have to look at, and it's probably not part of the VA mission. Another part of the VA's mission is suicide prevention, but in 2008, only $4 million was provided through the VA for suicide prevention issues, and in 2024 it ballooned all the way up to $571 million, which is a heck of a lot of money. And like you, I probably don't have any issues with the amount of money because it's a serious problem. But the fact is, we still have 6,500 vets who commit suicide annually. So we've made this huge exponential, far more than exponential increase in funding, and yet it hasn't addressed the issue at all. So we have to look closely at how much money there is, where it's going to, and whether it's being effective. In this case, it went from 4 million to 571 million, and yet the amount of suicides among veterans remains about the same. So something is not working there. So again, it's just another example of the DOGE is going to be looking at these things, making changes, and putting aside the hyperbolic and selective outrage of media headlines. We need to take a closer look at what's actually happening and see whether it's a bad thing or not. And in this case, so far, it doesn't seem to be a bad thing. And so we'll see moving forward if the amount of service offered by the VA drops, or legitimate programs get challenged or eliminated, which I don't see happening. Then that's going to be a problem. But right now, DOGE seems to be on the right track, even with the VA. And the future removal of 80,000 employees will just put us back to 2019 levels, which also seems legitimate. So anyway, that's how I feel about it. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.